So if you've not already had a look at the working document, then it might be worth having a little bit of a look at that, particularly if people have got updates. If you could be adding them into the member updates section there, because I've moved member updates down to the end so we can go through the other things first, and we'll see what time we've got left at the end. But it's quite nice to just have a little bit of a snapshot of what people are doing. So if you can pop them in there, that would be really helpful. And then on the agenda, we've got a few bits of things and one demonstration from David. So the first little bit of a kind of admin thing is the GitHub, where we did a little bit of moving things around just to try and make it a bit easier to navigate. So if I put the link to that in here, you can have a little look around. Hopefully it makes sense. It was speaking to Lilian after the last meeting, we thought some of the things weren't necessarily in the easiest places to find. So that README page has got links out to the meeting stories, the contributors, and the glossary. Do feel free to go add things to that, change things on there if you think there's things that we've missed. It's there as a collaborative thing, so please do add to it. Okay, so then I'm going to pass over to David, who's going to talk a bit about something he's been working on and tell us a little bit about that.
Excellent. Right, I was planning to do something super fancy with the screen, but Zoom was not playing ball, so I'll just do a normal screen share and see what happens. I think this will probably start sharing my screen.
Yep.
Can you see?
Yes.
Something with Bookdown in the middle? Okay, perfect. Okay, let me just open the third thing. You can see an R Studio thing there as well.
Yep.
No, perfect. Excellent. All right. Yes, I thought it'd just be nice to show you kind of what I've been up to. It's got strong overlaps with what Shazi has been doing and some things Morjan's been doing, and I'm sure things that are going on down in Bath with Emma in terms of trying to generate essentially HTML things with maths in so that they're super accessible, while keeping an eye on the fact that students kind of quite like PDFs generally anyway. And so just switching entirely over to HTML is probably not ideal, especially if we're trying to encourage general population to move to something that's accessible. Telling everyone, oh, you can't have PDFs anymore, everything's got to be in all your latex now being destroyed. You can't have PDFs that look like anything like they looked like before. It's all got to be in HTML. That's kind of not really a fight we kind of want to be having anyway, I don't think. So essentially just a quick demo of kind of what Bookdown kind of offers and what you can do with it, and I'll show you the sort of things I've done with it so far. Feel free to jump in and just unmute yourselves and ask any questions if you fancy. I think if you make a message in the chat, I will probably see it somewhere on the screen. So what I'll just show you here is the main source I use is this amazing guy here. He has written lots of different interesting things through R essentially, but Bookdown is an addition to Markdown. So so there's Markdown, and then there's Pandoc, which converts Markdown documents into whatever format you like. R Markdown is specifically designed around R. So R Studio, which I'm showing you here, is one of the most popular user interfaces for editing R code, and this is the most used editor, I think, for doing R Markdown code. So this is like a mixture between Markdown. So this text here looks like Markdown because I've got things like head titles, and then I've got text, and here's the symbols for bold and stuff like that. But hidden inside this Markdown, you'll see this is called an R block. So this is inside R code. I've said I want an R block, and inside R, I'm using the graphics. It's designed around the idea that you could be generating statistical reports where this code could be actually a plot that's done live from some data, and you need R to generate the plot live to draw a picture to then put the picture into the document. All right, so that's what the R thing looks like. I'm going to come back a second to Bookdown. So Bookdown, this is a really, really good resource. So bookdown.org is generally the place, and this particular author has written, oops, if I go back to bookdown.org, this particular author has written a few different things. There's a few R Markdown books here, and then this particular the Bookdown book. So the Bookdown book, unsurprisingly, is about making books using Markdown, and particularly for us and equations and stuff, what it's added, if I just jump to the right page here. So it's a nice motivation page that explains kind of what's going on here in terms of why Bookdown it was invented. Claverton Down is the name I've seen that Emma Cliff's group have for their version of Bookdown. I'm not sure at what point, essentially, whether they diverged from Bookdown or whether they diverged from R Markdown, and that Bookdown and what Claverton Down are doing is very, very similar. There's essentially the same functionality in terms of things like equation numbering across multiple chapters and general numbering and labeling and referencing working well across chapters, which doesn't ordinarily work in Markdown. Let me just jump to the other thing that's particularly nice in here. So in here it talks about you can have equations that are numbered, and you just need to use the correct kind of labeling structure, and you can number things in exactly the same LaTeX code is used in the R Markdown as you would in LaTeX. So there's nothing new for someone who's working in LaTeX. What I'm going to say at the moment is I propose it. The workflow is I've got LaTeX documents, and essentially I convert the entire thing into an R Markdown document by hand, but there's not much to do because all the equations, all the LaTeX can stay exactly the same. All that needs to be changed is things like the headings of the chapters need to be in Markdown format rather than, so I haven't got a system like the Chiron system that Newcastle got where they're auto converting stuff. It does involve essentially training to write your code in R Markdown rather than writing it in LaTeX. But all the LaTeX-y bits that people really are wedded to in terms of equations are available completely as normal inside R Markdown. So there's numbering of chapters, numbering of theorems and proofs, lots of built-in environments inside Bookdown. It will, there's slight niggles. You can't fully control the numbering in the sense that you can't choose to have the same numbers across. You can't have theorem 1 followed by proposition 2 followed by lemma 3. I think that kind of thing is not supported in HTML nicely across multiple pages. So it numbers chapters, so it numbers theorems separately to numbering lemmas and stuff like that. So I think there's no easy way of fixing that. Right, rather than show you any more of this, I'll just show you the 3 things here. So down here on the left, let me just make this bigger so you can see the whole thing. Bookdown supports, there's 4 here, there's actually slightly more, but there's essentially 4 different styles. And the Bootstrap style and the Gitbook style are particularly designed with accessibility in mind. So the Gitbook, if you've been to, I'll show you rather than, so here's my R Markdown. On the right here, I'll just make this bigger. I've got a directory. So what I'm thinking about is so I say book, what I mean here is something like lecture notes. So I've got lecture notes for a course, which is not, in a PDF, it would be between 50 and 150 pages kind of thing. And the issue is having that as one HTML is quite a ridiculous thing to try and generate. And also, I want to be able to have a PDF that the students can use straight afterwards. And I also want to have an HTML which is fully accessible through either using MathJax or MathML. So for each chapter, here I've got an R Markdown file. So hopefully you can just about see the font's not super large, but there's my introduction chapter, there's my algebra chapter, there's my vectors chapter. So I've got my chapters as separate files in here. And just by clicking up here, build book, I can choose what sort of book I want to build. And I'll show you what happens if I choose BS4, so that's a Bootstrap 4 book, that just goes through each of the files below, compiles each of them separately, and then joins them all together into one blob. The output for that looks like the following. So this is the notes I've made for some of the summer program here. Now I've got this Bootstrap 4 has this 3-column structure. So the left are the chapters. So if I go into algebra, the center here is the notes themselves. This is the standard Bootstrap layout, which has got fancy colored boxes, and then the text and all this embedded stuff here. On the right hand side, I've got like a more detailed menu. This is designed around being like, if I read, this is all responsive. If I change the size of the window at some point, it cuts off the menu on the left. If I keep size of the window again, at some point, the menu on the right disappears as well. All the menus end up being here at the top, and you can navigate that way. So there's no work on our part. Bootstrap, which is the engine for essentially it's a template for HTMLs and stuff, has all this built into it. So there's no work required there. And the main thing for my point of view accessibility here is that I can use what's built into the browser here. So I can make this larger and smaller if needed. I can have add-ons in the browser which will change colors of things. The equations here, I've chosen to render them as mathjacks. That's just one of the choices I'll show you in a moment inside the R Markdown document. But this could be MathML if you prefer to output MathML. I've done a few fancy things in here. So some of Christian's stuff, so this is the numbas stuff. I've embedded numbas here as an HTML inside the HTML. There's a tiny issue here into whether or not, obviously I'm not controlling the accessibility of this window. I'm trusting that numbas is putting these embedded stuff in a nice accessible way. You can embed videos here. So here I just got an external videos hosted somewhere else, and with a clever bit of HTML, the HTML code here points to a place where there's a video, and I've got captions on these videos. What I've done is I've also embedded a link below every video. It says here's a link directly to the video, because as I'll show you in a moment, in the PDF, obviously this video doesn't exist. So in the R Markdown, you can tell it not to include the video, but just leave the text there. I think there's no other particular massive features I put into here for now. Yeah, I'll close that for the second. Let me just kind of show you how it looks in them. Oh, I can show you the PDF. That's probably easiest for now. So the PDF that's generated in exactly the same way, I just asked for the PDF instead, looks very much the same. So there's a table of contents, and then I can control all the formatting for this because you can give it actual LaTeX preamble. You can load all the right packages you want. So the colored boxes uses one of the LaTeX packages that does colored boxes. I think I'm using TCL color box or whatever it's called. But the main thing is that these color boxes can be styled inside LaTeX. If you've already got your LaTeX templates, R Markdown just generates an environment. It automatically creates something called /begin and then the name you've chosen. So you can write the LaTeX code. So this looks exactly the same essentially as the HTML, but this is just the LaTeX file. And wherever there was a video here, there's a bit of text that now says a video appears here in the HTML version. Click this link to go to that kind of thing. So that makes, okay, this PDF is not accessible, so I don't care too much about the PDF. I want it to look like something I can give to the students as normal, but you don't care about that probably. There's other styles, the Gitbook style. Let me just give you a preview of what that looks like. So you can choose amongst the various styles that exist. The Gitbook styles like this, which you'll recognize from Git, essentially, they've got a menu down the left with the addresses. The lovely thing about both the Gitbook and the Bookstrap is there's a search button. And if I just show you in this one, for example, in this search engine, I can search for the word inverse. Okay, in this demo, I can't do it because I'm not online in this example, but when I type up something into this box, there's a beautiful search box that comes up and searches across the whole document and shows you which sections you'll find this word in. If I did the online version, I'd be able to show it to you. So GitHub, the Gitbook has even more accessibility options built into the top. So that one's got pre-built in choice. You can switch between fonts, you can switch between backgrounds, you can change the font size just for the middle bit and all that kind of stuff. Again, whether you want to use this or not is unclear because probably students will already have their own things that they use to view HTMLs and don't necessarily want me to impose upon them, here's the right way to change the font size. But Gitbook's an option if you want to provide things that essentially out of the box that comes with accessibility stuff built into this. There's also all kinds of on-screen shortcuts that are built into the GitHub thing, the Gitbook thing. Let me just show you how hard it is to do. So here is, let me make this a bit bigger. I'm just gonna, where's the settings? I was gonna make the font bigger for you, but I can't remember where the font changes. Oh, here we go, just a second. Just go to here. I'll make your life a bit easier. Okay, so chapter titles and then just text. Use Markdown formatting for bold, for italics. Referencing can just be done with there's a particular format you have to live with, but it's very similar to LaTeX. Let me jump to there I can define a command for LaTeX here. So this is underlining, it's just a normal LaTeX code here. And inside the code, I'm just typing LaTeX. You can use dollars or the bracket slash stuff. They work fine. Here, the best way I found for embedding pictures at the moment, if you want the pictures to be like the correct size, is to use the R framework. So I use an R block that does include graphics. What's quite nice here is you can have captions, which have LaTeX in them. If you want alt text on those pictures as well, you can write fig equals alt equals, and then on those particular things, I can type stuff in here that will appear as alt text on the with the images. You have to decide whether you can have both captions and alt text. Sometimes the alt text, I mean, for this particular one, it wasn't required because it didn't. The caption told you everything it was needed, kind of thing. But there's facilities to have alt text and captions, or both, or neither. General, yeah, you can do display equations. Here's the standard thing that's the main difference with the main sort of thing to learn about in R Markdown is that there's these things called fenced divs. So any environment, rather than doing /begin blob /end blob like LaTeX, you have : and then whatever the thing is. Now I'll just show you here. This is the kind of requirement. If you want something to be able to be converted into LaTeX and into HTML, what I found is you need to do something like this, and I'll show you why in a moment. So if I get rid of the data LaTeX bit, that's the standard thing that all the guides say you need to do. That will create a box with a particular color box around it, and that's lovely. But what you have hiding in the background is, where's it gone? Here it is. So here in the background is my LaTeX formatting. So when you create an a book down thing, it creates all these files for you. It creates like a little template. It's like a YAML page, it's called. There's a page here, which is the most important one, where I tell it, this is the styles I'm using just for the bootstrap that I showed you with the 3 columns. This is the only code that matters at the top, these first 4 lines, essentially. I've told it what the theme color is, and I've given it a style file. The style file is for styling the HTML. So you can customize how the HTML looks because it generates all these colored boxes are just they're just divs in HTML that you can style however you like. There's just default styling in them. How does it style the LaTeX? Well, you can have a separate file for the LaTeX. And as you'll note here, essentially RMD note was the one I just showed you. So back here in my code, where's it gone? I did RMD tip, for example. That says open an environment, which is a tip. So it's going to be a box with a tip, essentially, a tip for the students. And in here, there's some LaTeX code that says RMD tip. What is it? It's a color box. And I've just chosen what the standard formatting is for that. Because I want to sometimes pass a parameter to LaTeX that goes with that box to give it a new title or change the color or something like that. That's why in the code, I've had to add this extra bit here. That just tells it that LaTeX is going to be passed some data, and you can't cope with there being nothing if there really isn't anything. So you just have to tell it, I'm going to pass the LaTeX this 0 blank bit, and that makes the LaTeX work. If I want to pass, I can pass all kinds of fancy things here. In particular, what's useful when you're doing colored boxes is you want colored boxes to split across pages sometimes, and you can pass a parameter that's a LaTeX parameter, which breaks the boxes across pages. And HTML doesn't matter because it's all in one page anyway. So you can pass parameters into the LaTeX, and you can do any LaTeX stuff here to format. Essentially, the R Markdown, the book down will generate a text file, which it then LaTeX in the background. So I've got environments, which are the color boxes. I can change the sizing of things. I invented my own color boxes, and there's one hack required on the general stuff. If you ever try and do pictures inside other environments, you can't have LaTeX can't cope with images inside other environments because they're floats inside floats, which is illegal. But you can fix it by telling LaTeX to not float the pictures, essentially. So that took a bit of a while to work out, but this is a sort of a nifty little hack that turns all the pictures in the LaTeX into, so all the floating images into pictures that will appear exactly where you want them. But there's nothing, all this green stuff is just my comments for myself. I've loaded whichever packages I want to load. I can choose the geometry and stuff for the LaTeX. So the LaTeX is essentially fully customizable. My main comment is that if I just go back and show you, so the WYSIWYG book, this is the standard one I've been using, which is the bootstrap one. I'll reload that in a second. These are the color boxes. This is all just styled in HTML. For someone doing this as a workflow, what you want to do is make the HTML work. So as you're working, the design is around, you can preview the HTML as you're going along. The general workflow, if you work in LaTeX, is that you often PDF, you PDF it every 10 seconds to check how it looks. And then at the end, kind of you go back and like, that doesn't work so well here because you kind of, because you want to kind of get everything down first. It's better to get the HTML working at the end, go back and make the PDF work. Let me just show you as well. If you have other desires for other sorts of, there are other nice layouts that particularly if you like any other layouts that already exist in HTML world, you can, without too much work, customize the outputs into your world. There's a built-in one called the Tufty environment, which I can just show you if you've ever seen this. There's an American, what's the word? He's like a typographer and like expert on like punctuation and lots of wordy things. This is a particular style he uses in his books, where you have what's happening is there's multiple columns. So I picked the wrong chapter here. If I pick a chapter like this, the footnotes all appear in the margin in this Tufty style. So you can have footnotes in the margins, you can have mini images in the margins. There's lots of nice kind of formats for documents that already exist out there. Was there one other I was going to show you? Probably not for now, that's fine. Yeah, so there's a PDF essentially these have been styled by LaTeX basically, but I've made them look exactly the same as they do in HTML. Let me just probably stop there a second and see if anyone has any questions.
I have a lot of questions, David. First of all, can we lock you away in a cupboard so that we can yeah, I'm going to have to get back in touch with you and consult with you on the kind of accessibility guidance we tried to put into R, but you've solved some of our problems here with some of the bits and pieces. But first off is about Gitbook CSS. You'll notice that the icons for accessibility settings is ironically not high contrast enough, tiny and not. Have you ever tried to adjust that CSS? Because if we could do that, that is the killer app for me in recommending that.
I haven't, but I don't think it would be difficult at all because because those things are just controlled in CSS. It's HTML. So if I just look at, oops, you probably can't.
I did that to try and look at it, but
there will be ways. For example, this what you can see now, this icon I've put here is the logo for my university. In the Markdown, which I'll just show you here. So there's one bonus bit here, for example, in this code. When I generate the Gitbook, there's a bit of extra code that I've typed. I said add this HTML to this is just the crude way of physically forcing a bit of HTML to appear before the table of contents. So you can physically just type some extra HTML stuff, and changing the size of things like that is entirely controllable. It's just a matter of editing the right CSS. I'm not yet. So if you want to use the Gitbook one, then I can probably look at that later today and let you know.
Thank you. That would be a valuable output to the whole community, I think, because I think that's the one thing that stops us from saying.
Are you using the Gitbook?
Yeah, I mean,
structure?
The default. Most of my tutors have ended up with Gitbook, and
Gitbook has the nice thing that it's got the built-in
PDF button, but even like Chiron had a PDF output at the bottom of their menu, which looks like the same as the Bootstrap that you're showing here. So I think they've managed to kind of adapt that so that the PDF is available in the same way.
So all I've done with the PDF that makes the PDF easily available is in the Markdown, in the intro section, so in the first page, I wrote some text that says, where's it gone? Looking at the right page, here we go. My first paragraph says this document contains a full set of notes in PDF format can be obtained here. And I've then put a hyperlink which points directly to the PDF. So in the Markdown, you'll see the first paragraph contains a link here. If I click that link, that takes them just straight to the PDF. So it's not a bottom at the top because I appreciate that they kind of would want a link to the PDF there.
So in the same way as you've put code for above the table of contents, you could probably code it below the table of contents or something. You
could put it anywhere basically. This bootstrap style essentially. I say at the moment, you see, I haven't edited that carefully. I've got a picture at the bottom as well that I didn't resize properly because the bottom is a bit too big. But the HTML that's output here is entirely customizable. There's basically a template built in to Bookdown, which you can edit if you want to. And the template is very nice and clean. I mean, all of this is owed basically to the people who've worked on Bookdown, and this document here has got a lot of really excellent explanations for how to do stuff. So all the hard work is clearly, I mean, this guy's done all the hard work here. What was I going to say inside here? Yes, I can show you the search boxes. This is one of the reason why I went with the Bootstrap one. I love more this one rather than the Git one, is if we've got a set of notes and I search for the word inverse, the students can quickly see where the word inverse is in exactly which section. So if they want to go, oh look, I want to go about matrices, I want to go to the exercises about inverses, I can click this and it'll take me to the exercises because the words appear there. The Git book does have a search box at the top as well. Over the whole stuff, I would say, so this is obviously designed around things that are big enough that you kind of want to have separate documents. Bookdown does offer like a single document version as well, where essentially if you were creating a worksheet, which is really only one page, you wouldn't want to use what I'm using here because you don't need menus on the left and right and stuff like that. And it does have other outputs than this one. I showed you the other one. I'll show you here. There's Git book, the book 4, and the Tufty one. Those are the three. There's a default one called Bootstrap with no menus, and the Bootstrap with no menus, I think, looks like. Okay, I've added a menu back at the top just for fun later, but that's essentially a single page. There's nothing on the left and right. And you can have stuff down the middle. Again, I think Bookdown is there's kind of no need not to use Bookdown. You can use just R Markdown if you're creating a single worksheet for students. Then actually, you can just use R Markdown because it's essentially the same. The only real difference with the Bookdown is it's got the support for bibliography stuff. It's got support for referencing nicely. And if you're not doing multiple pages, it doesn't potentially matter very much. Because here I can link between the chapters, which are technically living on different web pages. And I can have a link between the chapters, and I can number equations and not number equations and all that kind of stuff. But the LaTeX is basically like, I didn't have to learn very much to do this because I just have to learn this syntax for drawing the color boxes and the hashes for titles rather than slash section subsection from LaTeX. So someone who already works in LaTeX, I don't think it's a big ask for them to learn to write that, to move their LaTeX into this. Obviously there is work involved to convert. Like if they've got too many fancy things, then they have to be slightly careful. But for accessibility purposes, my philosophy is that there's lots of things people demand they have to do in LaTeX, which if they're trying to stay accessible, they probably shouldn't be doing it like that. They need to be thinking about how they're keeping some insanely complicated diagram. They need to think about, maybe it's just they need to be describing it in words better because it's just a diagram that can't be copied into. So just final other thing mentioned here in the Bookdown. Here's one of these documents. You can choose, where have I written it? So again, this looks more complicated than it is. Just for what I'm using, only the top 4 lines matter. One of the options here is a config. I think I can say something like math : and I can say mathml instead. So in the far right, if you saw when I compiled it earlier in this box up in the corner, this is all the compilation. The last line is a pandoc. This is pandoc running finally and doing the final conversion for you. There's lots of parameters that our Bookdown is calling. But if you pass mathml, then pandoc will generate a mathml document rather than default is mathjax. But anything that pandoc, yep.
Sorry, David, I'm just jumping in, but just something I noticed, because I see your LaTeX engine is still set up as XE LaTeX. And it took me a really long time. I was generating some documents for business studies. So it involved, in particular, pension derivatives, which wouldn't be rendered correctly in the PDF. You know, the math was still the copy paste of what I would have done in the LaTeX file, but somehow I can't remember what, but I think the D round didn't compute correctly, and it took me a very long time to understand what was the problem. It was because obviously I've been using LaTeX for years, and I've got my own engine, and I use PDF LaTeX as an engine, and I had to change the XE LaTeX to PDF LaTeX, and then it rendered the math. The PDF was then,
so I would say
fine. So it's just, and I guess, so that's my comment here, but I think more generally, I I think this is fantastic what you've done. And as you know, this is something along these lines that I'm trying to come up with, and actually that we three with Shazia are trying to come up with. My comment generally would be that I think we really need to have some live session with staff, because it's all these sort of little things that come up, take a lot of time to resolve. And I think that's where staff are a bit reluctant to jump in, because you know, even the books that you've shown earlier on, written by the guy, there's a lot of documentation on Bookdown and R Markdown, but I think obviously it's been written by one person from their perspective and their habits. I
think for our community, what we need is kind of the process that I'm going through there needs to be distilled down into some guidance documents and some sessions that staff can kind of go to, because you can't send all the staff to go and read this document and find the right bit in the document to get it to work. But once they're on board with the philosophy that actually you shouldn't be trying to do too much in terms of the formatting in what you're writing, they should understand that from the LaTeX world anyway. Should understand that in LaTeX they really were trusting LaTeX to do all the formatting for them, so they should trust Markdown to do the formatting for them. They should just be typing the content and using the right syntax. And people who've over the years got lazy in the LaTeX they do, that they end up using LaTeX to micromanage all the spacing and stuff, they need to stop doing that, because that's not what LaTeX was about anyway, and it's also not going to work in the Markdown world. In answer to your quick PDF LaTeX thing, I was in the world where I was using PDF LaTeX for many years. Then at some point I learned and found out from not that long ago that so essentially XE LaTeX and Lua LaTeX are the more modern versions of PDF LaTeX, and the main difference is the fonts. So Lua LaTeX and XE LaTeX have support for much richer fonts. And so you're describing the partial derivative. I'll bet that the way in which the partial derivative was drawn was using something like, nowadays there's multiple ways of doing it. One way is to load that curly D in a particular font, and you can totally load that font in XE LaTeX or Lua LaTeX. And then, but probably the code you had was code that only worked in the PDF back in the old world.
Presumably, yes. I think there were some conflicts. And
everything that I'm pretty certain saying that everything that you can do in PDF LaTeX can be done. Like it should be that Lua LaTeX and XE LaTeX. Well, Lua LaTeX is the best one, I think. Lua LaTeX should automatically do everything correctly from lower levels. So any old stuff that's just PDF LaTeX or XE LaTeX, Lua LaTeX should cope with it all. Unless someone's done something really hacky. Essentially, that's the comment. That's fine.
Partial derivative shouldn't be that.
No, but so they could have cheated and they could have tried to do the curly D in some weird way, rather than, you can just use LaTeX code and you can just load the right font package so that the curly D is available. But they may have done something weird. Sorry, I'll stop talking.
I could listen to you talk about this all day, David. It's really interesting, and it was very nice to see the process actually. Like seeing you sort of showing us where things came from was massively helpful. Thank you for that. And it leads quite nicely to the next bit, which is about TALMO and doing an accessible maths workshop, because what I wanted to ask people about is, I mentioned it last time, TALMO, if you don't know it, is Teaching and Learning Maths Online. They do lots of events over the year. They did a lot during the initial stages of the pandemic. And they've got a call out for sessions for this academic year. So what I'd like to do is put on a workshop run by this group where we have various demonstrations. So really what I'd quite like, David, is whether you might do a version of what you've just done now and do that for a bit of a wider audience, because I think, like you were talking about there, what staff need is they need to kind of see it. So generally the people who go to TALMO will be maths academics from various different places, some people from math support help places, and very occasionally learning technologists, but mostly kind of academics. So I think one of the things that would be quite nice to do is I've put the start of an idea of what our workshop might look like, with a bit of a welcome, tell people about our group so more people might join our mailing list. We talked about last time Lilian getting some of the students from there to talk about student perspective and why it's important, but then doing fairly kind of hands-on type things where you say, look, we're going to show you, this is how you make yourself something with R Markdown. I know one of the academics here yesterday was telling me about Jupyter book that he's been using, which is really similar looking, but coming more from a coding perspective rather than a stats perspective, I think was what the way it kind of seemed, and produced very similar kind of output of things which worked well. So I don't know what people's thoughts are, whether there's anybody here who might definitely say that they would like to do it. I know Christian last time seemed a bit interested, that he might talk about some of the things they do there. Any other thoughts for people we should approach who might be good for this?
I'll quickly answer and say, yeah, I'm happy to do something at some point. My next kind of processing is to take what I've just showed you there and put it into something that's more designed for practical usage for someone who sees it and actually what feels like they from that can go away and try and dive into it. Because obviously what I've done today wasn't designed around kind of you'll go and suddenly start typing things into immediately, but showing you what's possible. And it's not the Jupyter thing. Yeah, so R Studio was the software I showed you where I was typing my R code. Jupyter is like a super fancy, over the top, not in a bad way, environment for writing code that lives in lots of different environments. So you can write Python code, you can write R Markdown, you can write all of it, and Jupyter kind of essentially does in the background the same things that R Studio is doing. I think it just has plugins for coping with R code and with Markdown code. It probably just calls Pandoc in the background, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to give a quite similar experience for the student at the end of it, which worked well. And it's been nice. They came to tell, there was a Maths Away Day, and they came to tell me about it and how excited they were. They'd done something good for accessibility, which was a lovely start to the academic year.
Yeah, so how should we proceed with the TALMO now, Jenny? What's the action?
So probably I think the thing to do is that I can submit something saying, yes, we definitely would like to do something. Because we're a bit down on people today with the start of term, if I send an email around to ask if there's anybody else would definitely like to contribute to it, then we can see if we've got a few other people who might do it. I can also put the call out a little bit more widely as well. So it doesn't just have to be us doing it. It's more of a kind of, we can facilitate it and give people the space to talk. So I think it would be worth in there having a space for people to actually just discuss what's going on at their institutions, what support do they need, what are we doing about this, and try and kick off some of those discussions as well. So a few people, 2 or 3 people doing demonstrations of things that are working for them and a bit of discussion would take us easily to a couple of hours workshop. So if everybody's happy with that, then I will go ahead and submit that we're happy to do it. The only other thing I need to know is whether there are particular times of year we wouldn't want to have it. So if we think there's particular times of year that would be difficult for us to get people together, my feeling was that it probably depends more actually on like day of the week and when people are teaching and all of those things than time of the year. So they just ask for which months would you like to do it in.
I guess, I don't know about you, but I feel more confident if we target something like January, February, because this term's just going to go bang, and it just gives us all enough time to digest what David's shown us and Mojian and everyone has shown us, and to attempt, as David said, to almost move towards having guides that are easy for people to kind of get started. I'm a good test because I don't do anything too technical. So if I can understand the instructions, then we're good. Brilliant. I've made notes, Jenny. Yeah.
I'll put that in as a proposal that it's something that we'd like to do, and I'll put out a call for other people who might like to be involved with it. Okay, so next bit is replies from Code Banter, because you talked last time, Lilian, you were going to go speak to them.
Yeah, so they have sent us a little reply in a Google Doc in answer to all the questions that we put during the webinar last time, the meeting last time. but I don't know what people feel, but this kind of bulk remediation thing is, it didn't feel like they had cracked it yet. And I'm still nervous that something like that is possible. But what we did say was that we would try and generate a document that is kind of feasible for us to take to multiple suppliers to kind of test how accessible they say their systems are, how well it converts the maths, for instance. So I do have one of my interns did kind of get to that point of creating a bit of a package, which I'll link in the I can't find it right now, obviously, but I'll link to it in our members updates after this meeting. So, but yeah, feel free to access the Code Mentor thing if you like.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds good. There's a lot of things that are sort of promising, but not quite there in this area, is my feeling at the minute on a lot of it. Which the next thing on here is overleaf. And I just put that on yesterday because I've been talking to a few people about it. I don't know how many people at your institutions use overleaf, but I know there's a fair few people here, but we don't have an institutional license. And I realized that one of the quickest ways of being able to do accessibility would actually be if overleaf had an ability to compile to HTML, would make life easier. So I sent them an email, and I've put a link to the reply that they sent, which kind of said there are some workarounds, but nothing particularly yet. I just realized that as a group, it might be a good thing for us to start thinking about whether we put a little pressure on companies and be using their contact us features to say, could you please sort out your accessibility? Or if your institution has a license, send that through to your IT services team, because when we renew licenses for anybody, we ask about accessibility. And I know that our IT services people don't know to ask about that, but if I told them to, they'd put it into the discussions and they'd sort of word it in such ways as saying, well, you know, we're wanting to renew, but accessibility is a very important thing to us. So, you know, we have some concerns about whether we're going to be able to renew because you don't provide accessibility features. So really, it's a bit of a kind of tell you what I'd done there and see if anybody else fancies saying hello to them and just keeping it on their agenda.
I really like that. Yeah. So I have now added, I'm trying to minute that as well. Can we start to pressure suppliers about the accessibility of their systems? Yeah. So I have added as well, because Morgian was asking in my members updates, I have added, I'll share screen actually, so it's easy to see and it's recorded for people to see as well. So in my member updates, I have added the thing I talked about earlier, like something suppliers can convert to show how good their workflow is. So we have a PDF, which might be typical at the institutions, right? Lecturers have PDFs that they created from LaTeX. So can you turn that into something more accessible? But we also, we have an institutional license for Overleaf, Jenny. So we have the same PDF thing was generated from Overleaf. So it was created in Overleaf in the first place. So feel free to create an account in Overleaf and just have a look, I guess. And then Morgian was asking about differences between, well, no, talking about the accessibility or the idea around images and graphs and decimals and GeoGebra. Morgian, I'd be really interested in your view of this document that is something my intern, who had to pick those two things up from scratch, and she was comparing the accessibility of the two systems in terms of how easy it was to use. I'd be really interested in your feedback on this document that she was creating. So sorry, I've accidentally kind of segued into.
Yeah, I'll have a look, Lilian. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I've got your reply in the chat. We're kind of bouncing between topics, which I like. Yeah, I think it's the sort of thing a discussion session would be great on. If you brought your experience of what you've done, and then invite other people to talk about what they've done as well. I also put like how to do good alt text for maths things as well, potentially. Because I think that's certainly a thing I get asked about all the time, is like, how do you do good alt text? How do you do diagrams, figures? So just a kind of discussion session around that, half an hour feels like it would be a useful part of it. I feel like we've definitely got a workshop in here. If we've got a kind of 2 definite sessions plus the students, we'll probably have other people who are interested.
Did someone speak to us earlier in the year about alt text? I definitely remember, maybe it wasn't this forum.
Yeah.
I think there was someone at Open University who'd done a massive amount of work where they'd gone through large modules and taken months in improving all the text. They're going well beyond alt text, as well as then describing how to describe pictures correctly.
Yeah, so I think that was, I know Matt Deeprose has done a huge amount, but when it comes to STEM stuff, would anyone be able to ask around and see if we can get a contact of someone who might have done that huge amount of stuff on?
I can't remember. Maybe it wasn't this forum. Was it someone here? I feel like it wasn't that long ago. Someone was telling me.
Yeah, so the NWEA guide to accessible assessments is a really good guide. And what we've done there, sorry, Jenny, if you don't mind muting when you're not talking, I think. Oh no, you are.
I think it's
so
Ben's
is it Ben?
background, maybe. Okay, that's fine. Sorted now.
Okay, thank you. And I think it was we might be able to look back through our notes and see who it was, but certainly what we did was we took the NWEA guide to accessible assessments and we created a more pithy key points version. And this links to obviously the NWEA guide itself, which hopefully is useful. And we've tried to kind of create some examples, you know, in here using higher education maths, because the problem with NWEA guide is it's all primary, secondary school maths. So I think having HE examples is key in a lot of resources out there. We don't see enough HE examples. So this is, you know, using that guide, you know, this is the way we've put in. I won't call it alt text because some of it is longer than alt text. So the alt text might just be something like the first line shows the circles dar and dar plotted on an Argand diagram. And then the longer description, shall we say, is the stuff that's there. So we've had a go. The interns have had a go. And we've created our, of course, I've broken this, I think. I was using something that broke it. But if I hadn't broken it, you would have seen all the diagrams that we've done, where we've got quite a few Argand diagrams and other technical diagrams. I don't know the maths. But there was quite a few bits and pieces, and scatter plots are really difficult, aren't they? So yeah, that's our member update anyway, done. But yeah, lots of and our kind of captioning mathematical material. There was good discussion on GitHub about that. So you know, again, it's the start of the GitHub Jisc, well, the Jisc mail list, sorry. It's the start of the Jisc mail list coming to life, don't you think, Jenny?
Yes, and I'm hoping it will keep growing a bit. I know I talked to it at Alt last week and encouraged people to sign up, which I think got us maybe only a couple of people, but it's getting there. We keep building it. We've only got 3 minutes left, so we're going to be really quick. If anybody's got any last minute things, now is the time. nobody is waving at me. So what we'll do is, oh, Ben, go for it.
Sorry, I'm just trying to unmute. Thank you. I'm sorry I was late. I think trains to London are very, very disrupted. I think I mentioned this last time, but we've been working with the Pocklington Trust on some really basic minimum standards, that I think would be hopefully a good place to start for people where they're just trying to find their feet in STEM. But we were thinking, not just higher education, but further education, and we had a really good day yesterday, a little focus group session with some past and present students with the Pocklington Trust that they hosted, and it was really, really interesting. We basically took them through our draft minimum standard proposal and just said, look, just tell us all the things that you found irritating, all the things that didn't work for you. And it was very revealing. We got lots out of it that we hadn't quite expected. We very much had a digital focus on it, but some of the students were pointing out annoyances around printing out stuff in larger print and tables disappearing across multiple sheets and being almost unreadable because the header rows hadn't followed them onto the printouts and stuff like that. So we're tweaking the guidance. I mean, I think there'd be a very useful complement to what we're doing in this group in terms of a really basic introduction. They're not going to fix all of our STEM problems, but hopefully what they will do is stop people doing anything that will irretrievably stand in the way of future uprating and good work when we breathe on it later. So it's meant to be a real kind of ABC guide to get people started. So we're going to incorporate that feedback from the students with the Pocklington Trust. And then as soon as we've done that, I think we'll be in a position to share the draft, because we almost just wanted to test the concept. But it certainly felt from the feedback of the students we spoke to, some of them were current students and some of them are students who had recently completed, that there definitely is a skills gap, which I think we all know. But I sometimes, certainly my experience of working with academics is like talking about STEM gets very complex very quickly. And for people who are non-technical, I think that spooks them a little bit. So the idea is to sort of gently ease them in, and then we can scaffold it and build on it over time. So I think that will be in a position to share. So in terms of the workshop, it sounds like a really good opportunity to maybe do an airing of that and get some more feedback. So if that would be good, I'd probably co-present it with Dr. Jim Tyson from UCL, who is he's the mega mind behind the thing. I'm kind of just hanging on to his coattails, trying to understand it all.
That sounds great. That would fit really nicely in the thing if we sort of started with the kind of student perspective, and then we do the here's what your basics are that you need to do, and then we have some very specific things about particular things we know people have problems with. I think we can make up a really nice workshop with a set of sessions that kind of guide people through, where are you up to? If you're only just starting, here's Ben with the basics and we're going to be okay. You've got some of that covered. Great. Well, we're moving on to these things as well. This is where you're going to be going in future. It also just sounds like such a useful resource. That'd be massively helpful.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's exactly how I'm really glad you've kind of pitched it in that way. I think that's exactly where we're hoping it would fit in as a sort of starter for 10, because there was so much talk yesterday about people, just staff not really knowing what to do, and it ends up becoming the student ends up having to drive it and to be the kind of one training their own staff on how to do it. And they were just talking about words like exhaustion, that they'd done the work before they'd even started to do the work, if you know what I mean. And actually some really interesting kind of cultural things about even the nature of exam questions. There was a really interesting comment about, well, do you even need to make someone plow through a really complex table of data if is that going to measure the learning outcome, or is that just an unnecessary inconvenience for everyone? So could we streamline the way that the questions are done? And there was an engineering student there who was mentioning about just, well, some assessments are fundamentally just don't work. So that she was talking about measuring dots or something, distances between dots was a particular thing she had to do. But of course, using a very significant level of magnification meant that her measurements were very much different to everyone else's. So some very deeper level of understanding of you know, actually how the course is put together. I think hopefully these minimum standards will act as that little voice in the ear of people to just do some of that initial thinking, as I say, to not stand in the way of future progress. So yeah, that sounds exactly like the good place for it.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, thank you to everybody for today. We might have been a little bit quiet, but I think it's been incredibly useful. And I know Lilian's recorded it so that people who couldn't make it can go back and have a look at what we've been talking about today. And we will get some notes up on GitHub for anybody who wants to go back and find things. And I'll get an email out about the TALMO workshop to see if anybody else is interested in signing up. Lovely. So I'll let you get back to start of year chaos, or hopefully not chaos. Hopefully you're all feeling very calm and chill about it, and it's very nice. Yeah. Good luck with the new year, and we'll put another meeting in about a month's time. Sending out a thing to check when people are free seems to have been working, a doodle poll or something like that. So I think we'll probably have a go at doing that as well. Okay. Thank you very much then.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.